Okay, so I think this is a very, very good video explained by Apple Explained, which talked about the recent profit warnings came out by Apple. So, in this profit warning, Tim Cook basically blamed the entire Apple sales uh, based on China and the slowing decline in sales in China. And this video goes more in depth on why Apple's declining revenue is happening. And I think it points out some really interesting points that I have to admit that I do agree with. So let's look at it. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure whether WeChat is a good replacement for the iPhone, but if iPhone continue to charge those prices, um, it doesn't like the luxury the people that can afford are willing to afford, but the people that are borderline, which is a majority of us, will not be able to afford an iPhone. And that's exactly what happened, regardless of whether it happened in China or in US. Okay, so this is the part that I think Apple explained it really well. Yes, I agree. Basically, Apple have been kept with the same recipe that Steve Jobs have left them, which is a 2 year development cycle. And the 2 year development cycle is no longer fast enough or innovative enough. They're no longer offering any features that is justifying this price. You know, back in iPhone 4 days, like the 4S had Siri, the 5S was a 64-bit architecture. The 6S has Force Touch, which was interesting, but even then, people were not very convinced for the 6S. I remember there was such outrage regarding the iPhone 7 because the iPhone 7 looked exactly like the 6S and the 6 with a different color. So I'm surprised it even took this long for the market to respond. But it did, which is good because they're not allowed to put um, be lazy with their designs, and that's generally how I feel. But another point that was brought up in this video was Apple's direction in the future, because what happens is now that the market is so saturated, it's very hard to grow. They either have to make an iPhone that is much better, like the iPhone 10, or they have to make a phone that's a lot more affordable and cheaper. But they didn't want to do that because they didn't want to compete with a lower market tier, which I think is a mistake because iPhones are in, they have their unique operating system. So they have a very, very strong competitive advantage. So with the same price point, people would pick iPhone over Androids, but they're just not in the same price point. So if Apple can create something like that, then it's going to be worthwhile for people to go back to iPhones. But really, I think the biggest problem is they really haven't found the next big innovation that is replacing iPhone. I think that is the difference between Tim Cook and Steve Jobs. Um, Maybe Steve Jobs would have found something. It's hard to say, but I think Steve has the eye to see the future and is representing the users and provides a feedback loop for the company. Um, and somehow that Tim Cook just isn't doing that. So, yeah, these are my thoughts.